Thanks very much, Damien, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So, what I want to do this evening is just give you an overview of what I see a games-based approach, what it is to me. I suppose importantly to say, there's most people in the room are probably applying a games-based approach and they're applying it in their own unique way. I'm going to give an overview as to how I apply it. There's parts of it that you might take from it, there's parts you might say aren't for you. I think the important thing is to say it has to make sense to you, and in that way you'll be able to integrate it into your coaching as best as possible. So when I started out, I suppose, into coaching, one of the decisions I made was I critically evaluated my own playing experiences and my experience of being coached. So I was lucky enough to have some very good coaches and really getting down into why they were the coaches that they were, what made them special. And I spoke about, I suppose, what was boring. I didn't want to include that as a part of my coaching. I wanted to see when was I fit, when was I playing my best. And the common factors that came through in that, yes, the coach was charismatic. The coach spent a lot of time planning. But when I really digged into it, the coaches that I had very valuable experiences with, they employed games. Games were a massive part of the sessions that we had. And I have up here that our experiences of coaching and being coached shape the philosophies we emerge with. We need to challenge these from time to time. So that's what I'd urge you, I suppose, tonight and throughout the weekend and on a constant basis to do. We're probably bound by tradition, and we coach as we have been coached. But what I'd say is, from time to time, think about, is there a better way of doing that? I constantly ask myself that question. So a games-based approach to me, so it's the predominant use of games anyway, and game-like activities. So a game to everyone, it's not necessarily a 15-on-15 game or a 13-on-13 game. I believe a game is something where a player has to make a decision. It's non-prescriptive. So something that includes some level of opposition and a decision that has to be made. The sequence of the session. So again, for me, I like to include a game early to establish context. So rather than following a linear process of drills, followed by isolated drill activity, followed by modified game, and then finishes off at the game at the end, I actually like to start it with a game early on in the session so that, we've established something that we want to work on, and now we're actually going to break into activities to work on that. And I suppose it's important to say, it's not that I don't include drills or I'm anti-drills. Drills are absolutely important, but at the correct time. So if you're playing a no-zone game of 30 metres apart where players are asked to kick the ball or strike the ball over that, but they're finding difficulty in doing that, then take them out of that. Take them out of that activity and go into a drill that gives them plenty of repetitions, but at least there's rationale for doing that. Player-centred, so giving responsibilities to the players. I think it's really important that players they're not sitting there expected to sponge everything up, if you like, or take everything up like a sponge, that they're actually engaged in it. So that's something, again, I think is important from a games-based approach. And as I said, flexibility there, be able to move off plan and feel free to do that. And as I say, my beliefs, I suppose, they probably challenge traditional approach. The coaches should be more of a facilitator in my eyes, and again, as I've related to there with the order and the sequence. So my beliefs, I believe that skills can be learned through games. I believe that tactics can be learned through games. I think that the game, if designed well enough, will facilitate that to happen. You might say, first touch, how can you facilitate that through games? Absolutely. In the next slide, I'll actually touch on that as well. So they're non-prescriptive. Games, you're not telling them you have to go at cone A, then go to cone B, use this specific action in between. it's giving autonomy to the player. So the player has to decide what skill they choose to execute with, what movement pattern they decide to deliver, to execute the skill. And it's non-prescriptive. So it's allowing freedom for the player. And then finally, the development of fitness. So fitness, my belief again is that the game, our training should try and mimic the demands of competition. So what better way to do that than putting in situations where players are having to change direction, where they're having to take hits, where they're having to chase, where they're being forced to do something that they don't want to do, and again, that all contributes to the match fitness and the overall fitness of the player. So, unfortunately, I won't get a chance to discuss all of these this evening. I'll probably be covering them in more detail tomorrow for anyone that is around at that time. But just to talk about a couple of them, I'm talking about games here, but and as Pass alluded to, there's so many that exist. So I've named a few here. So you've got, if you just take our possession and directional games. So our possession games, most coaches are using these at the moment, and they're excellent. They're a brilliant way of working on fitness and in teaching, exposing players to tackles, exposing players to keeping the ball. But if a coach was to use that exclusively and wasn't using, for example, a directional game. A directional game teaches, for example, a forward to attack a certain direction that you wouldn't get in a possession-based game. A directional game forces a defender to defend a certain area. And unless you kind of blend a few of them together and at the right time, you're trying to develop the overall ability and intelligence of the player. And I think that's crucial. And I've here in just another one that I look at there, overload. So I spoke earlier about skill being able to be developed, or technical skills being able to be developed. So, people are looking at me at the moment saying maybe, well, how can you develop first touch, for example, through games? I would say a 4 versus 2 situation. Put a condition on, give the ball to the team of 4, put a condition on them that they're only allowed strike the ball on the ground and they're only allowed their steps. You've got 2 defenders there, but now what you've created is you've created a consequence for not touching or not taking the ball first time. You've given a context to it. You've given a game-specific area of working on first touch. And that's something that, again, this can be used at every single age group. It can be used at senior. It can be used at under 14. Put it in a 4 versus 1. Whatever, if you want to increase the difficulty, 4 versus 3. And you'll see it. You'll think even in a 4 versus 2 situation, at senior intercounty level, you'll still see players getting caught with that. But what they're doing now is that you're forcing them to adapt, but in a games-based situation. So the other, I suppose, big part to a games-based approach for me is the whole idea of a player-centered environment. And a player-centered environment, I look at that and I see, you're giving responsibilities to the players. You're trying to develop you're trying to develop thinking, individual thinking for them, and where they can actually, in the heat of battle, in a big game, where the coach or the manager has relatively little impact, they can actually do something for themselves on the pitch, but only if this is practice and training. So the likes of the use of questioning here, it's a way of empowering the player. You engage them. So ask them, use the water breaks. It won't disrupt flow there of the session. Use the water breaks wisely. If you're after working hard for 3 minutes, whistle goes, get them in. 2 minutes, very quickly. I want to see, what did we do well here? Why didn't that happen? All right? How could we have done this better? All questions like that. And you're using the time wisely, and I find that it works very well. So I have at the bottom here, providing opportunities for problem solving, all right, and player dialogue. So instead of the coach saying, this is what I want to take place in the next minute's play, provide an opportunity for the players to do it. Yes, they'll make mistakes in some of the things that they'll say, but they still should be provided the opportunity. And if the coach, I suppose, at the beginning, if their input has been as efficient as possible, then what the coach and through questioning, the players will know what to discuss in those and create problems for the players. So we have, one of the problems as a coach, I suppose, when you start off is that you're worried about, have I even numbers for a drill? What happens if, for example, let's take a simple drill of I have a group of 4, 2 players on the outside, 2 in the middle. So let's say, for example, we have a group of 5. Every other group has 4s and we have a group of 5. What do the players with a group of 5 do? I'd allow them solve it. I'd say, I want to see everyone involved. So what does that mean? I'd give them 30 seconds. What you've got them doing now is you've handed over some level of responsibility to them. So what you'd like to see is going to take place. Perhaps they include, instead of 2 in the middle, now they include 3 in the middle. And allow them to experience or elaborate on the drill. Even when picking teams, I want 2 teams of 7, rather than the coach sorting it. Again, provide you have 1 minute to do that. Put the time clock on them. All right? Now what you've got is you're promoting leadership within the groups. You're promoting a whole socio-cultural aspect to it. And then allow them to, or give them guidance on a formation. So they're just a couple of examples of how player centre can be used within a games-based approach. So, to summarise, I would say 3 points. The introduction of a game early. There's an array of games that you can use. I've noted a few there. You can add several more onto it. And finally, be conscious of a player-centred environment. Thank you very much.